Welcome everybody to this fireside chat with Kathryn Garbuzinski. She is the complaint engineering manager at MilliporeSigma and a Cornell MEM alum. I am really excited to talk to her about her role, her experience with MEM, her journey post MEM, and just get some insights. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you may not have heard about MEMPC. We are the Master of Engineering Management Programs Consortium. We are a group of Master of Engineering Management programs at 9 of the leading universities in the US. And we were formed with the goal of raising awareness about the MEM degree with prospective students and employers, which is one of the reasons why we have the fireside chats. We figured one of the best way to showcase the degree is by showcasing our wonderful alumni and the strength and the diversity of the roles that our alumni are doing right now. So thank you for joining us for this chat. Let's get started. Actually, one more thing about logistics. If you have any questions, please ask them, send them to us via the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. That'll help me go through them towards the end of the session and make sure that I don't miss anything. I'm also going to put that information in the chat, so in case anybody joins later, they have that information for reference. All right, so let's get started. Hi, Kathryn.
Hi, Ritu. Thank you for having me.
Oh, welcome, welcome. I thank you for your time, and I am really looking forward to our conversation. So would you mind introducing yourselves? I know that you are the complaint engineering manager at MilliporeSigma, but I would love to hear about your journey so far.
Sure. Yeah. So as you've said, my name is Kathryn Garbuzinski. I'm the complaint engineering manager at MilliporeSigma. So we build single-use systems, and my role is to investigate those defects that we get back for our assemblies. I manage a team of 10, and that team of 10 is doing that hands-on investigation, and I'm helping them develop professionally. I'm collaborating with customers on their priority concerns, and also more proactively trying to prevent future defects. And I can take that information back with that customer collaboration, and then we can help prioritize investigations and continuous improvement actions at our site.
So go on.
I was just gonna say I got my MEM from Cornell. I officially graduated in December 2022. Prior to that, I got my Bachelor's of Chemical Engineering from RPI in 2017.
And have you always worked at MilliporeSigma, or did you join MilliporeSigma after a stint somewhere else?
Yeah, I joined MilliporeSigma in 2019. I had previously worked with Integra Life Sciences under their rotational program, so working quality, regulatory, and operations in a 2-year period. And then I joined MilliporeSigma as a quality engineer 5 years ago in August, and then moved up to supervisor and then engineering manager of that same team.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank
5 years, it's a milestone.
Yeah, I get an extra 5 days of PTO, so I'm extra excited.
Oh, I can imagine, especially here in the US where the PTOs are like hard to come by. Like you
Yeah.
take anything you get for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
And you mentioned MilliporeSigma does single-use equipment or instruments. Is it in medical device? So has your background always been in medical devices or medical equipment, if you will?
Sure. So my first job was in medical devices. MilliporeSigma, my role is more on so single-use systems are basically large plastic liners that pharmaceutical companies will insert into their equipment to aid in processing, and it allows them to decrease time between production loads since they can just install the system and then throw it out. And it helps with the energy and environmental costs associated with sterilization of drums. So it's more efficient for our customers, and it's also more environmentally friendly than the traditional systems.
Very cool. It sounds fascinating. It's an area that I've not heard about, so I am very excited to learn a little bit more about it. Um, so tell me what brought you to MEM. You said well, never mind. You did your MEM at Cornell and you graduated 2022. Had you always thought about going and getting your Master of Engineering Management?
No, I actually got my degree in chemical engineering because I'm like, I never want to do college again. I want a 4-year degree and then I want to be set. And then after I graduated, I was, sitting bored after work and like, I need to do something. And initially I had thought about getting my MBA. I want to continue that momentum. And then I was, studying for the GMAT, and I was reading these books and seeing where people with MBAs typically went. And it was not quite where I wanted to go. And then I saw someone's email signature at my company and it said MEM. I'm like, oh, I actually don't know what that is. So I looked into it and saw it was geared towards like engineering and tech backgrounds. And it was designed to bridge the gap between like business and tech. And I'm like, that's actually exactly what I want to do. I really enjoy the technical aspects of my role and figuring out problems and getting hands-on, learning. I love learning and just being like a technical expert. And the more I read about the MEM, the more I learned that it would facilitate that sort of role. I don't want to be like a CFO or CEO. I want to I want to be familiar with the operation side of things. And this degree has perfectly facilitated that.
And stay technical, right? Like you
Yeah.
love engineering, you
Oh,
love technology.
yeah.
Yeah.
I spent 4 years working on engineering, like figuring out, developing those problem solving skills, and I didn't want to lose them, and I wanted to build upon them, and that has been my experience thus far.
That is amazing. I love hearing these stories because I've noticed that anytime somebody who is wants to do an MEM finds the degree, their face lights up and so this is exactly what I want to do. And a lot of the times they are, considering MBA because they don't know that MEM exists. And I'm hoping that we are playing a small part in at least raising awareness so that the next time somebody's thinking about an advanced degree, they know that MEM is an option and not just an MBA, if you will.
And that was my exact experience.
So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, how was it trying? And you did your MEM while working, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Was that a conscious decision? You said you want to work and do your MEM because it's hard.
It was hard, and that's what I really enjoyed about Cornell's distance learning program. I didn't want to have to quit my job and then go back to school full time. Just there's so much stress associated with that for me, and it's also very expensive. I just didn't have the funds to be able to quit my job and spend a year or two getting a degree. Um, so I wanted to also get those skills to work together. So apply my practical application, things that I've gained during my tenure at work, and build upon those in the degree so they could kind of have that immediate feedback loop. I could take the lessons I learned from the degree and immediately apply it to whatever I was working on. So I learned about the Cornell Distance Learning Program. I had seen some on-campus options, but I live in the Boston area and traffic is absolutely miserable. And I knew if I had to commit to that, I
Would
wouldn't
do
have been
it.
able to get it done as quickly or as flexibly. I don't know if that's a word, but the amount
Yes,
of
it is.
flexibility, perfect, that I wanted. So I also applied immediately before the pandemic. I applied in 2019, got accepted in like February of 2020, and then March of 2020, everything shut down,
Yeah.
um, which actually made it a bit easier for me because my work had transitioned from being fully on site to hybrid. So I was able to spend more time that I would have spent commuting, listening to lectures, doing homework, working on my group projects, and it just overall made things a lot easier for me.
And I can imagine even with scheduling, right? Like if everything was going virtual, then you were able to do virtual classes. And it was like a godsend at that time, right?
Oh
That
my
you
God, it was
chose to
perfect.
do virtual. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, was it hard studying and working? Because MEM is a very fast-paced degree for the most part. And I did it in person and I took like 2.5 years to finish. So I can't even imagine doing it while working. So was it hard?
It was. I'm very fortunate that I had a very supportive supervisor and then manager while I was getting the degree. My company, or MilliporeSigma, very much encourages continuous learning. We have a tuition reimbursement program. Between Cornell's distance learning program, where I could watch recorded lectures, I didn't have to attend in person if I couldn't. It made it so much easier to make it work with my schedule. So if I had to work a 10-hour day one day, then that's fine. I knew I could watch the lecture later. And the benefit of having a cohort where everyone was pretty much in the same boat, or if they were on campus, like work on their degree full time, they had a bit more flexibility in their schedule. So it was great to be with a group of people who very much understood my exact position. And again, with my supportive supervisor and manager, if I had to step out for a couple hours, like it was no problem. And it was just very much geared towards my professional development and being able to take those skills back because they did benefit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds like Cornell's programs also geared towards working professionals. So they've taken that into account, knowing that not everybody can be live in lecture every single time and give you the flexibility.
Yeah, professors were very, very accommodating of that, and I'm so grateful for them because I remember my first semester of the degree. It was I believe economics and finance for engineers or engineering managers, and they started talking about like doing integrals for calculus, and I'm like, I just did integrals like a few years ago, but I don't like this is so stressful. But the professors, walked us through it because they knew some of us had been a little removed from the the pure math side of things. And there was a moment where I'm like, I'm not sure if I can actually do this degree like while working full time. I don't remember everything. But being in a class full of people who were in that exact same boat, who were able to kind of like reassure me, like, hey, no, this is a tough adjustment for me too. It was really nice, and it did make things so much easier. And that was my hardest semester. And then, yeah, every semester was rigorous, but once you kind of have that flow, it's easier.
Yeah, I think our first course was probability and statistics, and the MEM program I went to is a mid-career professional program. It's MIT's program, and so all of us had come in with maybe 8 or 9 years of work experience going in, and so you hit that first probability and statistics class, and you go like, I have no clue. Like we did that so many years ago that it's not gonna happen. And so I was thankful for the primer in that sense for pushing us, saying, hey, just get used to, going back and looking for things that you used to know but no longer know, if you will. So I can imagine it's the same feeling.
It was very much the same feeling. And I did have to tell myself a little bit. A lot of people who go to grad school, it's because they like learning and they are, you know, motivated and driven. So for me, I've always been like, okay, wait, I need to like get perfect grades for everything, but that's not necessarily the goal when you already have like work experience and they can build off of each other. So it's not about making sure you get everything conceptually perfect on paper. It's about, okay, well, how are you internalizing this and bringing it back? So it's not about getting perfect grades. It's about maximizing what I'm learning.
That's right. And I think how do you apply it in real life? And I think you doing the degree while you were working, I believe, gives you probably an opportunity to go back and apply it probably the next day or the next week or so, if you will.
Yeah. So I moved up from an individual contributor to a manager during my degree, or to a supervisor during my degree. And when I was interviewing, I was able to take away the lessons that I had learned during like my negotiations class, like my leadership skills class, and I was able to reference those in the interviews. And I think that was a differentiator for me. Of course, I was on the team, so I knew the technical experience, but being able to show that I also had the management potential, especially in something as tricky as moving from like an individual contributor on a team to a supervisor, because it does have that power dynamic change. So having this degree really helped me navigate that too, and really enabled me to be a great people leader.
Was that always the goal? Like, had you always wanted to become a people leader?
Um, Not always. Because I love technical skills, I didn't realize that
Right.
if you like technical, you could still become a people manager. So in one of my internships, they had talked about like, oh yeah, we want to teach you how to lead people. I'm like, why do I why do I need those skills? And then throughout the internship, I learned how, because my manager during that internship, he had something similar where yes, he was really great at the technical work, but he was also a great leader. And he just helped me realize that like it doesn't have to be one or the other. So that's when I realized, okay, wait, I actually really enjoy the idea of leading people. And then as I gained work experience, being able to see successful technical backgrounds be amazing leaders, it really solidified me wanting to be a people leader. And now that I'm actually doing it, I really enjoy it. I love helping people identify what their passions are and help, like, being able to help grow that. So of course, I want to make sure I'm doing right by the company, helping them gain the skills necessary for the role. But how can we look past that? And it's so rewarding, bittersweet, but rewarding when someone leaves my team to move on to like a higher position and they say like, yeah, thank you for being so supportive of this. Like, I know you have to backfill me and it's gonna be a process interview, but I appreciate that you always supported me, even if it was to your direct detriment.
Yeah, it sounds like you see the impact you've had in people's careers, right?
Yeah, it hasn't been much impact yet. I'm still relatively new, but it's been really great. Right now I have a team member who's interviewing for another position. I'm like, yeah, just let me know what you need, like letters of recommendation, anything like that. And she said, I don't really want to leave the team, but I appreciate that you've been so supportive.
That's amazing. So you mentioned moving into a leadership role while you were doing your MEM, right? So now you are getting a graduate degree and you are transitioning into a new role with which requires new skills. How was the transition?
It started off a bit rocky because I didn't quite have the confidence in myself at that point. Like, I knew all the theory to lead people. Um, but it was intimidating for me to now, be in charge of the people who I was
You
working
work
side
with?
by side with.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't quite sure how to navigate that. But as I started doing it, like, I knew I was working longer hours. It was tough going from like, okay, this is my role, but like, this is my role now. It's slightly different. Um, so it was challenging just to adjust to the power dynamic primarily. But because I was going through it as I was learning how to lead people, it was so much easier because I'm like, oh wait, hang on, that's like kind of exactly what I'm going through right now. And immediately next day I was able to take away some of those skills, like especially like emotional regulation and just, even though I was leading with authority, but leading without authority type skills because I was still kind of like, am I old enough to do this? Um, but it was difficult just starting, but once I got the hang of it, it was much easier to draw from my lessons, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, absolutely. There's always a little bit of that doubt and self-doubt, right? Saying, I got the role, but did I deserve the role? And then now that I have the role, can I do the role?
Yes, a lot of
Right.
imposter syndrome, just always. I still experience it, but
Trust
I
me, yeah, I understand. I do too. I do too. Like every complex decision, I'm sitting there saying, huh, um, is this the right, what is the right thing to do? Am I in the right place, if you will, right? Yeah.
yes. And I think that's something I've taken away from the MEM. It's like not necessarily making the 100% most perfect decision. It's like, okay, well, you have to make a
A
decision.
decision.
Like, just make it, and you know what, you can probably deal with the consequences. And
Yeah.
that's works for me, like avoiding the analysis paralysis and just looking at the data, making a risk-based decision, and then going with it.
Yeah, that sounds like a very smart way and a very, I want to say, technical way of making decisions, even when it concerns people for the most part, right? So even if you're in a leadership role, managing people while managing a technical team, that's kind of, it sounds like the tools you learned are applicable across technology and people management.
Yes, yeah, and one of the classes, believe it was like decision analytics. But they talk exactly about like, yes, this is how you make decisions like with a technical approach. And like, yes, there are going to be less qualitative factors or less quantitative factors, more
Quite,
qualitative factors, such as like, okay, well, what's your happiness going to be like? And just how you can factor that into your decision. So of course, it's not going to be purely mathematical, but it does give you a basis to make a decision. And I use that all the time, uh, especially as people are involved.
yeah, I can imagine. And then, so your role is people management, but are you also involved on the technical side of things for the actual complaint engineering piece of it?
Yes, I'm heavily involved in technical skills still. We actually have a project kicking off in a couple of weeks to improve our cycle times. So basically our turnaround time between when we receive the complaint or the defective assembly to when we relay to the customer what that issue is and what we've done to improve it. So it's a lot of data analysis in terms of, okay, well, what is our current state? What is a realistic future state? And what can be done and with what level of improvement? Um, so then being able to take those project ideas back to the site so I can begin to implement them and work with the relevant teams to make those improvements to our overall process, whether it's the manufacturing process or just the complaint investigation process. So I'm excited about that. Um, and right now we have a large quality improvement initiative going on to make sure that we are targeting the top customer concerns, which is where I come in. We have all the data. I'm able to travel to customer sites and take back their feedback in order to incorporate it. And so having that voice of the customer and really just incorporating that and not just seeing in a silo, well, okay, these are the defects we're seeing in process, but like what are our customers seeing and what are they reporting? So what do they care about?
Yeah, that sounds like a project that has a lot of stakeholders involved, from
Yes.
the sound of it.
Yeah, across the entire business. So I work in our Danvers facility, so it's all technical people, it's all the manufacturing process. So with these projects, we've been able to work more with, the commercial side of things, the people who are heavily involved in like the marketing decisions, the R&D decisions, how they decide what gets worked on, so we can incorporate it into our manufacturing process. So it's really cool to see just the entire life cycle of the manufacturing process and being able to incorporate that in every decision I make. It's like, okay, well, we know in terms of like the design of the product or the equipment that's used, but like what else do we need to consider when we're making a decision?
Right, right. When you consider the entire use context and who else is involved, if you will.
Yes, yeah, from start to finish. My terminology is failing me right now, but it's something we've talked about in like my product engineering course
Yeah.
or product management course. Just what we need to consider from the start to the end of the product, how we're going to maintain support, and how we decide what features to include next. So it's interesting just to see the entire company basically involved.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it sounds like it's a perfect way to apply all the knowledge MEM gives you or gave you, if you will.
Yes, constantly, especially the project management, what timelines are realistic, how do we assess them, what are our limiting factors here, our bottlenecks. So it definitely is comprehensive. And I still go back to my notebooks and my notes and my slides that I saved from all my time, and say like, okay, hang on, I learned about this concept. Like, let's see how I can better utilize it.
Yeah. I haven't done much of that, but maybe I should, go back to the notes as well. I try to kind of Google it for the most part. Um, but I think that's the fascinating side of it. I've learned how versatile the way of thinking that MEM teaches you is, because then you can use that process across multiple domains and multiple problems you're trying to solve.
Yes, and honestly, a big piece of it is really some of the empathy that the classes teach, because of course they're teaching you people management skills too. And it's very easy to say like, oh, well, in theory, like I know exactly what to do, but in theory versus in practice is so different. And these classes really do enable us to kind of practice what it would look like and how it would feel. Of course, not exactly the same as like taking it into work, but I felt a lot more comfortable, especially like negotiation skills, being able to kind of manage customer expectations versus what's feasible versus what they're insisting is feasible, um, and kind of just being able to manage that emotionally and ensure that they are still walking away happy, because ultimately we want them to be happy and we want to make sure that we're not over promising.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like a very tough thing to balance, especially when you are dealing with some of the top customers or the top defects, right?
Yes. There's a customer right now they are very certain in what they want, and I very much respect that because I know that they have their own stakeholders that they're beholden to, and they have their own priorities. Um, so they very much want things a certain way, and I want to help them meet those goals. So I definitely have to emotionally regulate myself too. Hearing about like the reptilian brain and that like the amygdala hijacking and making sure that I am breathing and managing my emotions on those calls so I can provide the best support that I possibly can, and then ensure that we are implementing the actions necessary. It is something that I had never thought about before the MEM. Like, oh yeah, I get stressed, so count to 10 and then you're fine. It's there's so much more to it, and just having the additional skills taught by the MEM, like being able to even something as simple as like recognizing your emotions, something I never thought about, but has made such a big difference in just my overall mental well-being and then the level of support I can provide.
I believe that I discovered Brené Brown's book about identifying emotions, I think a year or so ago, and it was eye-opening. It was eye-opening because I know, and she says that, and it's right. Like they said, people can identify when they asked how many emotions can you identify. They said three. I'm happy, I'm upset, and I'm sad. But there's a whole range of emotions that goes behind it. So I feel that is amazing that the Cornell's MEM program talks about it because it's a very important skill to have, especially if you want to grow as a person, but also grow as a leader, because you have to understand that what emotions are playing through the room at the same time.
Yeah, and it was a fun exercise too. We actually printed out the wheel of emotions, and every day we had to check in and see like how we were feeling. And it sounds like, well, what's that going to do? But it really does make such a difference. And like doing it consistently, it builds those pathways in your brain, so it's easier every time. Like saying practice makes perfect. It sounds simple, but it's exactly true. And I've just gotten so much more comfortable with emotional regulation and being able to not manage my own emotions, but also anticipate and help address the concerns and emotions of the people I'm working with, whether internal or a stakeholder.
Right, right. All right. If I were to ask you what are some of the most important skills that MEM taught you, what would you say?
Oof. Negotiation, definitely a big one. It was an elective, and I'm so glad I took it because I am a people pleaser at heart. Um, so it really taught me a lot about saying no, making sure I'm not overextending myself, and just practicing like asking for what I want, and then making sure that if I don't get exactly what I want, then like what am I okay with? At what point do I walk away? And I know a lot of people who are going into this program, I'm sure they're so willing to take on new challenges, but it's important to recognize when to say no and when to walk away, and what really are you capable of taking on. So negotiation, big one. Data visualization, another big one, especially as you have to present to more senior leaders. I was never good at programming. I'm still not great at it, but I can hold my own. And there are a few classes that the Cornell's MEM program really, really focused on, like RStudio and Python, like just being able to put together like even Excel, like just being able to put together a simple, effective graph. It's not something that is taught normally. It's something you typically learn on your own. So being able to just have the knowledge base behind it has been instrumental in me giving effective presentations to leadership to make sure I can get what I want or what I need. Um, and then of course the emotional management piece is my last big one because it's another soft skill that not necessarily taught in your typical engineering curriculum, but it's one thing to have the knowledge, it's another thing to be able to portray it in a way that lands with people. And these courses absolutely focus on that. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you're not effectively sharing your point, you're not going to get anywhere. Those have been my top. There are a lot, but those were my top ones.
That's amazing. And I think to your last point, it is about communicating to the right audience, right? So speaking
Yeah.
to the audience you're talking to, like what you would say to an engineer working in your team versus what you would say to senior management to get them to make a decision in your favor is completely different things, even though you might be using the same data set to talk about it, if you will. Um, yeah, it was one of the skills we had to learn as well. We were told that remember the other side is not always an engineer, and remember you're not a typical customer either. So you might think that using this by flicking these 4 different switches in combination is the easiest thing to do, but you are not the ideal consumer of products. Like you are not the norm.
Yeah, I even had a senior leadership visit not too long ago where there were two very different personalities that I was presenting to, and I was trying to explain, how our product quality is looking, what the top defects are, what I think we need to do, explain why numbers are bad. So one, he was basically the COO of our company, and he's very stoic, very quiet. He speaks only when he needs to, and it usually comes across as very critical, but he's just very data focused. So presenting to him was very different than the individual he was with, who's very social, very outgoing, like want to hear about you like as a person and what you're working on. So it it was almost an art trying to balance, like, yes, we want to show the data, but like this is how it kind of connects to the company message, not just in terms of like, okay, we had a 10% increase this month and then a 30% decrease year over year. And so it is very
It's an art.
difficult to present to an audience when there's so many different types of people. But it's a valuable skill for sure.
I can imagine. And it's not along the same lines. I was going to ask, what is your strategy when you have to talk to these different stakeholders when you are running a project or leading a project, presenting the complaints that have come through and what changes need to happen? Because I can't imagine that being an easy task either.
Oh, it's a fun challenge, honestly. So I do spend a lot of time preparing. I, loop in my manager and others to kind of bounce ideas off of. And one thing that I've had to practice is not doing all the technical work myself. I could spend days trying to get together all the right information, like learn everything. But I've learned as I progress in my career, my job is less like the individual data points. So I've learned to delegate a lot better. Again, as part of the MEM, that's something that comes up in a few of the courses, making sure you're allocating your resources appropriately. So I've leaned a lot on my amazing team. They are so great at pulling data, relaying their perspectives, and then I sort of just filter that down, and then talk to people who have worked with these stakeholders before and get their input. Basically, I try to streamline as much as I can. I want to maximize everyone's time. So I make sure I have a nice, relatively polished product before I send that out for review. And then I do a lot of practice. I book conference rooms and then I just practice my presentation at least 4 times. I time it. I practice in front of a coworker, and then I just hope I'm prepared the day of. I have note cards. I have like backup plans. It's a lot of this is my main plan, but I have B through D just in case.
That is amazing. And that sounds like a lot of prep, but I'm sure you walk into the room feeling super confident.
Yes, yeah, and I also power pose a little bit too beforehand. Just take a couple minutes, hands on my
You
hips,
know?
and then
Yeah.
get those
Take the
cortisol levels
space.
down.
Yeah. Yeah. Take the space you need.
Yeah, and it also just gets easier with time. I'm, more comfortable with the data, more familiar with it. Of course, I work with it every day.
Yeah.
And then the more I do it, the less stress I feel about it because I've done it before and it went fine last time. So it's going to go fine this time. And just overall more confidence in myself too.
That is amazing, Catherine. It sounds like you are on a very exponential growth trajectory, both professionally but also personally, in terms of the skills you're developing um, in this role. In this role, so if I were to ask you what is the most fun aspect of this role, what would you say?
Um, Most fun is probably being able to see everything. Like that's one thing I enjoy about, being in the quality group is I have to be familiar with the entire process in order to identify potential improvements because I have to constantly think about what potential ramifications are of the improvements we identify. Um, and then I also get to see things from the customer perspective. One thing I have added to my development plan is making sure I can see more of what the customers are actually doing and get that direct feedback. When people come to me, it's probably already bad news. So they're already upset, they're already stressed. And of course, I want to fix their problems, but I also want to make sure it never gets to that. And I want to know exactly what it is that they're prioritizing. So by being able to work directly with the customers instead of just addressing their complaints when it's too late, I I can see exactly what they're looking for and then be able to fix it. And then I get to work with all these amazing teams at my company and learn what their perspectives are too. So I really just love being able to see everything and then being able to build upon my knowledge because there's always something new.
Yeah, it sounds like a very complex optimization problem, right? Trying to optimize everybody so everybody walks away happy.
Yes, yeah, I've learned a lot about critical to quality attributes and just when everything's critical to quality, like how do you assess what's the most important? How do you like for the defects that maybe customers don't notice, but we reject in production, like, okay, well, how can we manage the balance between we want the product to visually look good, but we also don't want to inhibit like our output. Um, so it is a very interesting balance.
This is amazing. I love the conversation because it sounds like the role you're in is perfectly suited for what MEM teaches its graduates to do because it sits in that intersection of technology and management. And you get to exercise the technology muscles and you get to exercise your business skills, but also the leadership skills, uh, and then grow in that space, if you will.
Yeah, and I had a skip level with my manager's manager, so the basically the department head, and he and I talked about what my career goals are, and I'm like, I really like sticking with the technical part, but also still working with customers, like deciding what features need to be implemented. And he's been very supportive of like that intersection. And he's like, yeah, I know it sounds like your path is making sense. Like it doesn't make sense for you to get an MBA unless you want to like really move
Right.
to like a business centered direction, which
Yeah.
it it's just not something I've been interested in. I really like the technical aspect, and I'm glad that the MEM has facilitated that, and my company's been very supportive.
That sounds like a great place to work as well in that sense to have a supporting supervisor and a boss that says yes, I understand and I agree and I this is your path forward, if you will. um, are there more resources that you lean on when you're trying to work through a problem or a decision by any chance?
Um, yeah, I talk a lot with like other managers and supervisors and subject matter experts at my company because I know I don't know everything, and it's really helpful to get that outside technical perspective. Um, during the MEM program, I definitely leaned a lot on my husband, fiance at the time, because I'm like, I need someone to tell me if I'm overreacting, and he's always been
Right.
very good at that, thankfully. Um, and even just like some work problems where I'm like, okay, like I know this isn't objectively that important. So just being able to have him to kind of gut check me. It is just good to get outside perspectives because I can get very much in my own head. And just being able to talk to other technical experts or even someone who has no skin in the game has been very helpful to give me perspective.
This is just great. I love how self-aware you are and you know where you need help and you're not afraid to ask for that help. I think that's half the battle, right? Being open enough to ask for help versus just closing in and say, I can fix this all myself.
Yeah, I've learned, unfortunately, from experience that when I try to fix things myself and like, hide when I make a mistake, it just makes it worse. Um, and I think honestly that's another area where Cornell and therapy too has helped me is being able to not just recognize where your weaknesses are, but make active strides to improve them. Because if you know what your weaknesses are and you're not trying to fix them, you're not really changing anything. You're going to be in the
Right.
exact same spot, and whether it's a week or a month.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Agreed. And that's just amazing. I am doing a quick time check. I don't see any questions so far. So our audience and attendees, if you have any questions for Kathryn, please send them to us via the Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom window. If not, we'll just continue our conversation. And I want to make sure that I do address any questions you may have for Kathryn. Um, so, Catherine, if you were to looking back at your journey, if you were to give any insights to prospective MEM students, what would you say?
Um, Take the time you need. I know there's a lot of pressure to get things done as quickly as possible, just in general in life. but I took more time for my degree. I know it's slated for 2 years. I took 2.5 just to split up my last semester because I knew I was overwhelmed with all the things that were going on in my life. And it really did help. And it's not a contest. You're going to end up with your degree, whether it's in a year, 2 years, 5 years, but it really does just help you to internalize it if you're not rushing through it just for the sake of getting that piece of paper at the end. It's important to make sure you are taking the time and checking in with yourself to actually learn the material. You're paying a lot of money for it, or someone's paying a lot of money for it if your company's paying for it. And it's important to actually take that away.
Yes, I would heartily agree. You're gonna do it probably once. You're not gonna go get another MEM. So make the most of the time and take as much time as you need to make the most of it as well, right? Learn as much as you need to learn till
And
you're ready.
my cohort, I worked with several different people over the years, and even now my company does sponsor some of the engineering projects that are like the capstone project. And I've made some really great connections with people over the years, and that has made such a difference too. Like being able to just learn about their experience and their perspective and still connect with them and see how they're doing. It's really great just being able to see outside of like my immediate bubble.
I agree. I think that was my experience as well. My cohort was multidisciplinary, just like Cornell's is, and it was fascinating to hear how different industries handle the same problem very differently. And then you try to see similarities as to how in the problems they're facing, but then the differences in how they handle it. And you're like, oh, that makes more sense. Or no, that makes no sense, if you will. And you
Yeah.
just learn as much from your cohort as you learn from your professor, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one thing that the MEM does really well in terms of group projects, because pretty much everyone is there because they want to be there, not because they need this degree for a job. So it's so fascinating to just be in a group of such driven, smart people and like listen to their perspectives. It's very different from my group projects in undergrad. And I think I gained a lot more from these, like just more applicable skills than I ever did before this.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, we have a question from Bruce. He says, what do you see as present opportunities for leadership and technology in the future? I think I'm going to tailor it to say in your field. Like, what do you see opportunities for leadership and technology in at MilliporeSigma or in what MilliporeSigma is doing for the future? So, what are your next big challenges you think, or next big technology changes?
Um, next big technology changes. I know we recently released a film called Ultimus Film, so it's much stronger and it does attack bag leaks, which make up a significant number of complaints. So it's really cool to see how that's developed and reduced this one top defect area. So I think being able to target some of our other top defect areas, which I think are industry wide, but things like particulates in single-use systems or if something's built wrong. So some opportunities there I think are honestly in AI. I know that's a hot button topic right now, but just how can we leverage like vision technology to see these defects and catch them where manual human visual inspection might
Mhm.
fail. So kind of just targeting the other top two defects.
Very cool. That does sound fascinating. And it sounds like a very applicable use of AI, right? I mean,
Yes.
some of the uses are out there. You feel like, okay, why? But in this case, it sounds like it would make a real impact if you were to able to harness it.
Yeah, and I know that there are a lot of companies out there that are promoting AI for QC type roles, and being able to implement AI, it does require a lot of leadership skills because you need to manage the culture shift associated with it. In terms of technology, you need to be able to understand what the limitations are of these systems, and there are so many uses. And with MilliporeSigma, we have very customizable products, so it's not just the same thing in an assembly line; it's individual assembly is getting built. So how can we ensure that the systems do actually meet those requirements and can catch what we need them to catch?
Absolutely. Um, I think that was the one question I have. I don't see any more. So I have a question for you. Um, so as a student who went through MEM while you were working, what looking back, what would you tell yourself to do differently, or what would you tell anybody else considering that, to say, okay, think about these before you move forward, or this is how you should go about doing it?
I wish I was a bit better about scheduling my time. I took the approach of every Saturday morning, I would get a large iced coffee from Dunkin' and I would sit at my table and I would just do all the work from the week, which ended up being a little stressful because I'm like, okay, wait, I need to get this done over the weekend because like I have things to do during the week. So I wish I would have actually spaced it out and spend a little time each day working on something instead of trying to get it all done in a block.
Chunked.
Yeah, it's turns
Yeah.
out I did not retain as much when I took that approach as versus the weeks I did try to spend a little time each day.
Yeah. Bruce, thank you for the insights and the conversation. So I thank you too. Thanks, Bruce, for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. What I have one more question for you. And I think that has to do with the idea of cohorts and how Cornell's programs design about. So Cornell has on-campus program as well as distance program, right? And you were doing it at a distance while you were working. Were you able to interact with the on-campus students as well when you're going through the courses, or are courses designed just for distance students and separately for on-campus students?
Yeah, I did interact a lot with the on-campus students. There were some courses that were entirely online. So we still had a syllabus, videos to watch each week, but we also had courses where they occurred on campus and were recorded and then posted online later. So if you were able to participate in like virtually, but like at the same time, you had that option and you were still in groups with people who were fully on campus. So it was a good mix of people who, yes, were remote doing the same distance learning, but also people who were fully immersed in the Cornell culture who were either immediately getting their MEM after their undergrad degree or they took some time and they're just in the area. But yeah, it was definitely a mix of working with on-campus students. And it did allow for just more discussion because they had a completely different perspective than I do as someone in biotech.
Right, right. And that I guess that's a very good aspect and a very good point as well, right? As somebody who's coming straight out of undergrad has a very different perspective of things, versus somebody who's been working for a little bit and has a little bit more practical side of things to put in, right? Uh, yeah, that is awesome. All right. Anything else you want to share with our attendees in terms of your role or in terms of MEM at Cornell, or any advice you have for them?
Uh, Honestly, I say just my probably advice, just kind of go for it. Like I
Go for
thought
it.
about a degree for a couple of years and then once I had the work experience, I immediately went for it. The further removed you are from, you know, whether it's a degree program, the harder it is to kind of get back into it. But there's no better time. Like you might as well just start now. If it's a little too much, you know, you could scale it back, but it's better to start it and then have to stop than to just never start it. I know some people say like, oh, well, why would I go back to school? You know, I'm like 35, like I'm not going to get my degree until I'm like 39. It's like, well, you're going to be 39 either way. So you might as well
That's
have a degree
true.
with it too.
I think that's the best advice that I've heard so far, is to just go for it. If you think it is the degree for you, you should just go for it, because there's
Yes.
never going to be a better time for it, if you will.
Yes. And honestly, like my degree, I think it's already paid for itself between like my two promotions in the 2 years following and the tuition reimbursement program that my company thankfully offered. It's been more than worth it for me. I gained so many valuable skills and I was immediately able to use them to get my promotions. And I'm so thankful for that. I absolutely would not have had the skills or confidence to do this in the timeline I did. Um, and I'm very thankful for these opportunities. A lot aligned for me in order to have everything work out. And I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I loved hearing about your journey, Kathryn, and how you've taken what MEM gave you and were able to apply it almost immediately in your job, even to get the promotions, switch to a leadership role, but then also succeed and have fun in this leadership role, even though it was a big jump, or it sounded like challenging in the first place, if you will. And it's so great to see you enjoy that piece of it and discover yourself, as you said, and always become a better leader, if you will.
Yeah, always looking for new opportunities. And I'm glad Cornell facilitated that. And thank you, Ritu, for your time.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the conversation. I want to thank all the attendees as well. If there are no more questions, then I appreciate everybody's time, Kathryn, you as well. Lovely conversation. It was great talking to you. I can't wait to see what you do next. So I'll definitely stay in touch and maybe we'll talk again in a year to see what other promotions you've gotten and what you're working on, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you, everyone who attended. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out.
Yes, please. I will make sure that I send out Kathryn's LinkedIn profile link. So if you have any questions for Kathryn, even after this conversation, please feel free. Is it okay if they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, absolutely.
Feel free to connect with Kathryn on LinkedIn and ask your questions. I will post this recording on our website as in the next few days, and I will send the link out as well. So you can go back and refer to whatever you might have missed already. So thank you again. I appreciate you spending time with us on this Friday afternoon, Kathryn. I wish you the very best for the future and an amazing weekend ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone who attended, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.